Howdy, folks. Welcome to the podCAST Iron. My name is Laura Mullen Vermilia, and on this podcast, I interview members of the cast iron art community in order to inspire, educate, and spread ideas about iron casting and cast iron art. Tripp Jarvis is our guest on today's episode. I met Tripp in person for the first time this past SLOS conference, and after interviewing him, I can already tell you that he's one of the most honest, hardworking, and kind individuals that I've ever met. I'm honored to be able to share this episode with you so you can get the story from his perspective. And if you're already good friends with Tripp, maybe you'll hear a new story or gain a deeper perspective on how wonderful of a person he is. Tripp, thanks so much for your ability to be so open and honest about your life. It was great to be able to see how the hardships that you've gone through and also the great achievements that you've accomplished have shaped who you are and where you're going. I'm honored now to have you as a friend. Okay, for everyone who's listening or watching, before I go any further, I have to blast this in your ear one last time. The city of O'Fallon, Missouri hosts a rotating sculpture series called The Shape of Community. And if you've listened to any of the past 8 months of episodes, I know that you've heard me talk about this, but the time is now. And the last update from last month is that if your sculpture gets chosen to be in O'Fallon, Missouri, installed there, then you get a $4,000 stipend for the loan of your piece. And that's for an 18 to 22 month loan, depending on your schedule and your needs, coordinated with the city of O'Fallon's kind of installation schedule. So now there will be 10 sculptures selected. Don't procrastinate until the deadline at the end of this month. If you have a sculpture that is suitable and you're willing to have it installed for $4,000, get your application in. And I think it's even free to apply with up to 3 pieces. So come on, team, give them something to choose from. They have provided me with this exciting and informative video clip, so let's watch it now.
If you're an artist or know someone who is, become a part of O'Fallon, Missouri's The Shape of Community Rotating Sculpture Series. No matter what medium you choose to sculpt your masterpiece, you get to use the whole O'Fallon community as your canvas. The Shape of Community invites artists from across the U.S. to have their work installed in prominent outdoor areas of O'Fallon to allow the public to see and interact with their creations. Some have even become permanent installations at sites within the city. Visit ofallon.mo.us/shapeofcommunity for current examples and for more information on how to submit. So whether you weld it, cast it, or carve it, let the Shape of Community shine a light on your creation. It's time to cast your mold on a city's landscape.
Yes, when you visit their website, you will see at the moment that the cast iron art community is very well represented in the group of 10 sculptures presently installed. And let's keep it that way. You've got a really good shot. The deadline for this call for submissions is the end of this month. So that's Thursday, February 29th. Get your submissions in as soon as possible. If you have any detailed questions about the opportunity, please contact the Cultural Arts Coordinator of O'Fallon, Missouri, and that is Martin Linson, and his email address is mlinson@ofallon.mo.us. But all of the information about how to apply is on their website, and this is a great outlet for iron casting artists to showcase all of that big, heavy metal that we've been casting. Now, a few words about the sponsors of this show. The podCAST Iron Show is sponsored in part by individual supporters on Patreon. And yes, that's about 20 of our friends and colleagues. So thank you to everyone who's gone over and joined as a Patreon member to help me afford the production costs to keep this show going. And I'd also like to thank our top supporters of today's show, which are the Metal Museum, Crescent Creative, the Western Cast Iron Art Alliance, and SLOS Metal Arts. These fantastic organizations provide the main resources to keep my ability to produce these episodes afloat. And so I'm going to take a few quick moments to introduce them to you now. First up, I'm thrilled to tell you about the National Ornamental Metal Museum. The Metal Museum, located in the heart of Memphis, Tennessee, is the only museum of its kind dedicated to preserving, promoting, and advancing the art and craft of metalwork. The Metal Museum offers a unique experience with a rich exhibition schedule, a growing permanent collection, an on-site blacksmith shop and foundry, and education and outreach programming. From demos and classes to master workshops and 2-year apprenticeships, this museum offers vast opportunities for all skill levels. So mark your calendars for the Fire Casting Conference that's going to be happening May 30th through June 2nd. It's open to students as well as emerging and advanced artists. Personally, it's one of my favorite conferences to go to. But additionally, the Metal Museum is entering a season of casting with its 2024 exhibition calendar. Opening February 18th, the exhibition titled Branching Out explores the fascinating ways that mentors, students, and foundries share knowledge in paths of growth resembling a family tree. Also, in April, don't miss casting artist Morgan Lugo's Tributaries exhibition, which is titled It's All Relative, with a reception and artist talk on April 21st. And in September, immerse yourself in the works of master metalsmith Preston Jackson. His exhibition titled A Hidden Culture critiques today's society through a mythologized Civil War-era American South. Learn more and get involved at metalmuseum.org and follow them on Instagram at Metal Museum. Thank you so much to the Metal Museum for supporting today's episode. Another sponsor of today's episode is Crescent Creative. Crescent Creative is a digital design and fabrication studio located in Birmingham, Alabama. They utilize CNC router technology to produce foundry patterns, outdoor signage, furniture, and public art commissions. If you have questions, they have solutions. You can find them on Instagram at Crescent Creative. Check them out and give them a follow. They are always up to creating interesting and artistic custom designs for their customers, and I personally love seeing their projects pop up on my Instagram feed. Thank you so much, Crescent Creative, for your support of the show today. Another very meaningful top supporter of the podcast Iron is the Western Cast Iron Art Alliance. They are an organization that consists of iron casting artists in the western states of the U.S. Their organization's goals are to educate, demonstrate, and exhibit cast iron art in the western region of the U.S. And one of the ways that they accomplish this goal is by hosting a conference every 2 years. So start planning to come out west for their conference this fall of 2024. The upcoming Western Conference will be at the tail end of October in San Diego, California. And I just want to point out that you don't have to live in the Western United States to attend the Western Conference. So you should definitely make the trip. They'll love to have you. And I'll be there, so I'll love to see you as well. A big thank you to the Western Cast Iron Art Alliance and their board members for their support of this podcast. For more information about this fantastic organization, visit their website, which is wciaa.org. Another longtime supporter of the podcast Iron is Sloss Metal Arts, which is a national center for iron casting and metal art. Based in Birmingham, Alabama, they host our national conference on contemporary cast iron art and practices every 2 years. On Instagram, I also follow the account NCCCIAP, and you should too if you want to keep up to date on conference-related things. So that's the Instagram handle that the national conference uses to get all the information out. And so I saw that they posted an open call for steering committee members. And so if you're interested in helping run the national conference at Sloss, visit the website nccciap.com/calls, CALLS. and see what materials need to submit to apply to be a committee member. But I think if I remember when I did it, you needed to put a resume and a cover letter of why you want to be a committee member and kind of like what subcommittee you think you would be best suited for. And applications for that are due Friday, March 1st. So I personally was on the steering committee for the 2017 and 2019 SLOSS conferences, and like honestly, it's the most rewarding thing that I've ever done for the cast iron community. So if you're interested in sharing your talents and giving back to our community, please consider throwing your name into the hat. And the due date is going to be before the next podcast goes out. So this is my only time to tell you that we need your help and get your application in. And now that the 2025 National Conference Planning has officially kicked off, keep up to date, like I said, by following the NCCCIAP Instagram account, and also follow SLOSS Metal Arts on Instagram. And that will keep you up to date on all things SLOSS related and conference related. But SLOSS Metal Arts related at the moment, they're accepting applications for their resident artists positions. So that's a 3-year full-time paid job with health insurance, and they're going to be taking 2 people into those positions. And so all of the information about this is on their website, which is slossmetalarts.com. But again, this is the only time I get to tell you this is the last chance I get to tell you about the deadline for that, which is Friday, March 1st. So get your application in. And lastly, SLOSS is accepting applications for their summer visiting artist in residence. And so if you want to be an artist at SLOSS, but you can't commit till the 3 years, then the 8-week residencies, which happen in the summer or in the fall, that might be just what you're looking for. And so the applications for the visiting artist in residence is due on Friday, March 15th. And so that's a lot of artist opportunities between the steering committee, the 3-year resident artist positions, and the summer visiting artist in residence. That's a lot of opportunities. So thank you, SLOSS Metal Arts. You are an amazing resource, and we so greatly appreciate your support for this podcast. So finally, let's get into this conversation. Thank you so much for tuning in today, and please enjoy. Tripp, Jarvis, welcome. Thank you so much for being on the show today.
Thank you. Thank you. Yes, I'm excited. I've
Good.
been following some of them, not all of them, but I've been catching on to some of them. So,
well, I'll tell you what I tell everybody is they're not going anywhere.
Yeah, I know.
My mom told me if you post anything on the internet, it's there forever.
Yeah.
So you've got all the time in the world to listen to them whenever you feel like it. Yeah. So, but this is about you. So I want to know. Well, Tripp. What? Say that again.
Who the hell am I?
Exactly. Who the hell are you, anyways?
Okay. Well, the standard answer, of course, is I'm an artist in iron casting and sculptor. But I wear many hats. I am the program director at Josh's Hope Foundation. We teach and train young adults with mental illness. I call them industrial art skills, and we provide employment for them. So that's one of the things I do. What else? I'm an artist at Liberty Arts Foundry and Studio in Durham, North Carolina. I'm a resident artist there. And I'm a mental health advocate. I am very close to getting my certification as a peer support specialist. So, and I'm father of 2 kids who are in college and living in Estonia, going to school. And that's all related to Carl. He's the reason why.
Yeah.
The kids are in the world. So, but yeah, that's more or less me. Did a bit of gallivanting around the world, but those are the many hats I wear. And that's more or less where I mean, that's all. I mean, really.
Okay.
I mean, yeah. But all that will I guess some other things, a lot of things people are shocked, but it's very relevant to my story and to the iron casting too. But I also have schizoaffective disorder, which very few people even can possibly fathom because I manage it so well. But all of that is mental health and art and healing is as much a part of me as any other part of, so, but we'll get into all that
All
sooner.
right.
Yeah.
Good. I'm excited.
Yeah.
So let's rewind though quite a ways and go back to your
Yep.
childhood. And
Yep.
can you tell me some memories of early introduction into art or working with your hands, or something that happened that you feel like turned you into the amazing person that you are today?
Well, I don't remember a time I wasn't doing art. Like I taught myself how to draw by copying the Sunday comics to see how well I could draw Garfield without tracing. You remember you did that in school if you could draw without tracing?
Yeah.
So I would spend hours doing that, and then I just kept copying, tracing everything, and that's how that's my first memory with art. But I really don't remember not doing it. And then as far as between then and the first time I really got using my hands and building stuff was probably 12, 13. Started building skateboard ramps
Oh.
because my parents bought this old farmhouse, 100-year-old. And then it was 100. Now it's 130, 40 years old farmhouse, and they spent years renovating it. And of course, I had to sit there and help my dad, hang wallpaper, caulk molding. I had to pull out all the nail. He had this barn full of wood that the previous owner had, and I would spend. So when I went to go, I had an endless supply of wood. They weren't the same size, shape, or anything, but I had this endless supply of wood. So I'd go in there and I'd pull them out to make a ramp, and I would pull out the nails and then straighten them, hammer the nails flat and straightened, and I'd build my skateboard ramp. And I must have built one every 2 or 3 months. I was building a skateboard ramp. So I guess house renovations and skateboard ramps is what got me into the physical realm of working with my hands and model making. I made a lot of models, yeah, and battleships, mostly battleships and some cars and stuff. I did a lot of model making, and then there was also what was I going to say? I would like, I don't know how many. There's a lot of sculptors probably that when they were kids would take things apart and try to put them back together. I
Yeah.
did a lot. So I remember vividly taking this remote control car, and I was like, how does this thing work? And I'm probably like 7 or 8. So I started untaking it apart and pulling apart. And I said, okay, I have no idea what any of this does. I'll put it back together. And you put it back together, and of course there's two screws still sitting to the side.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
I guess that was my fascination with working with hands and building things is pretty much that. So
So your dad definitely was having you help him work
yeah,
on the house, so
yeah.
he encouraged you to be building things, but how did
No,
that get
it wasn't even encouraging me to build things. I just started doing it.
okay.
I was the first professional artist in the family, you know.
Okay.
So this is, even though this is way before then, I remember one time being in this is maybe high school. I remember being in the North Carolina Art Museum. And I saw this sculpture of this. It was done with all this. It was basically one of those sculptures with farm equipment welded together and all this thing. I was like,
Yeah.
oh my God, that's amazing. That sculpture doesn't have to be a person. Oh, wow. And I was just like, I'm like 14, just blown away. So I decided I'm going to go home and I started pulling out everything out of the barns, all the barns. I was pulling out barbed wire. I was pulling out boards. I was pulling out old farm equipment. And about an hour later, all I did was have a big pile of stuff in the yard. And I was just like, I don't know how to put any of this together. So, but yeah, I guess my first sculpture was a installation of experimentation, but So yeah, those were, I took art all through the years. Growing up, I remember the first time I made a dolphin out of clay in 5th grade, and it had to be hollow. And the teacher was explaining us how they could be hollow. So I made this dolphin, and it looked great. And she says, "That's amazing, Tripp, but it's got to be hollow." I said, "It is." She goes, "What do you mean?" I said, "I cut it in half and I dug it out and I put it back together." And I was so proud of that for so many years, like just because. And my mom kept it up in her bedroom on the mantle
Mm-hmm.
there for years, and then and after a while, I noticed it hadn't been around. I was like, "Mom, whatever happened to that dolphin I made?" She goes, "Oh, it fell off and broke." So it fell off the mantle and broke.
Oh, dang.
And then there's then what one last thing for this is elementary school. We had an amazing art teacher. He had us doing clay busts. And I remember
Yeah.
this one kid, I did mine, and I wasn't successful with the head bust as I was with the dolphin, but I made this thing and we called it Julius Caesar because we didn't know what else. That's what it looked like for some reason. But I
Yeah.
remember this one kid did it. ET, the extraterrestrial.
Yeah.
He made. I just remember being like, that dude's badass, man. You're like, and this is 3rd grade, and he did an ET head, and I was just wow. So I guess those are some of the highlights of being inspired by art. Um, as far as being young.
Mm-hmm.
So
Mm-hmm. So then having all of this experience with art in middle school, high school, did that lead you to college for art?
no. So for some more backstory, I'd be real quick about it, but as far
No,
as
you don't have to be quick. You can tell us your story.
by the time I was 12, I did it up to 17. I was a springboard diver, doing
Oh,
flips and stuff in the water. Yeah.
wow.
And I did the tower, the big 10-meter tower and stuff. And I did that for many years, but I got hurt a lot, and it caused a tremendous amount of anxiety. And I think that's where a lot of anxiety I have comes from. So I wasn't even going to go to college. I was just going to stay at home and have fun with my pals, and my mom begged me. She said I had gotten a scholarship offer from UNCW, University of North Carolina at Wilmington. They offered me a scholarship because they had come to state championships, and I had won states my sophomore and junior year, and was going to would have won senior, but I quit when I was 17. I just had enough. So I was had this scholarship opportunity, and mom's like, "Please, Tripp, just go to orientation just to see what it's like." And I said, "Okay." Well, so I went, and of course, I had a great time. I partied in the dorm room and all that stuff. So,
Oh,
you know,
yeah.
and then there were just girls everywhere, and it was the beach and sunshine. So I said, "Okay, I'll go to college."
Yeah. Yeah. I had a similar experience at my freshman orientation. I just remember being like, there's so many boys here and nobody's watching what I'm doing. And I
Yeah,
mean, it was
yeah,
never really a choice for me. Like it was like you are going to college. It was non-negotiable, but that orientation
yeah,
we can swap stories off camera,
yeah.
but it was
But anyhow, so
yeah.
so um, so I ended up going to Wilmington, and I took art classes.
Mhm.
Um, with really no intention of succeeding at anything other than moving to another place and partying.
Yeah.
But so after my freshman year, I had a breakdown. I got put in the hospital for psychosis, and it that shook me up so bad that I couldn't continue. I tried to continue my sophomore year, but I was still too mentally delicate in my mind to focus. And of course, I was getting back into the same bad habits and crowd and stuff. And so I started to slip away again. And anyhow, I realized I needed to drop out because I was failing everything.
Mhm.
And so I just called my parents and said, "I'm wasting your money." So
Mhm.
went home. I remember laying around for a month, and then they're like, "You got to get a job." And so they called a guy from my parents called a guy from our church, and he was a construction foreman. And so I got a job in construction. And after a year of that, I drank so much more in construction than I did in college. I was like, Mom, I want to go back to school.
Yeah.
And it's like, okay, you can go back, but you can't go back to Wilmington. You have to go to ECU where your brother is, and you need to do art, because that was the only thing I could tangibly focus on and actually do. Like I had trouble reading textbooks and paying attention, but I could work with my hands all day. And so that's how I got back into the art world and got into college for art. The college, I started kind of cleaning up my act a little bit. But I was going to be a painter, and then a graphic designer. And then I eventually found sculpture. But the stories of that's quite funny, because when I got to college, Carl was my design one teacher.
Oh.
And so being a freshman, yeah. So being a freshman, it's just, solid cement, concrete block walls,
Yeah.
and Carl was my design one teacher. And I remember sitting there, and at this point I'm still a little fuzzy about things. And I just remember him, like I was like, who's this bald man? He's just kind of crouchy old guy. And all I can imagine him having to walk around for eternity in those halls. And I was like, God, his life must be hell. I don't want that life. That was my first impression, and then
Yeah.
but anyhow, he was a good design one teacher, and we talked. And but at that point I had no idea I was going to go into sculpture. He had come in at one point during design one and says, "Okay, kids, if y'all want to come by, we're doing an iron pour tonight." And I was like, "What's an iron pour?" He's like, "Oh, we cast molten iron." I was like, "What do you mean cast?" I was just so naive about sculpture. So anyhow, I try to get into graphic design, and I'm not really enjoying it at all. Just, and we have to, it's time to submit our portfolios. And I was like, man, I don't want to do this. And the word going around the school back then was that if you didn't redo every assignment for the first 2 semesters of your graphic design, then you wouldn't get in. That was what was being whispered. You had to redo everything. And I was like, I ain't doing that shit. And at that same semester, my advisor said, you need to take a 3D course. And I said, what do you mean 3D? He's 3-dimensional. I said, oh, okay. What class would that be? And he said, why don't you take sculpture? I said, I don't want to make clay heads. That was my I was just so naive. But anyhow, he said, just, you have to take a 3D class, just sign up for sculpture. I said, okay. And so I signed up for sculpture. And the second project I think we did was stone carving. I was with Hana and Jabron. I don't know. And so Hana used to float around Sloss a little bit, but he got me my first piece of soapstone. And when I got hold of that, the funny story with that is I was like carving one day and I was doing hammer and chisel. He says, why don't you use pneumatic chisel? I said, I want to do it like the masters, just and hammer and chisel. He said, look, Tripp, if Michelangelo would have had a pneumatic chisel, he would have used it. He would have used whatever technology he had at the time. And I said, well, and my hand was getting sore. So I was like, yeah. So that was that. And so I I got through the first sculpture class, survey sculpture. And then I was like, I think this is what I want to do. And you only needed 4 pieces to submit. And so I decided I was going to do that. And maybe 2 stone carvings, a casting, and what was the other thing? I don't remember what else I had. And Carl was there for the review,
Mm-hmm.
and they're like, why do you want to be in sculpture? And I kind of
Mm-hmm.
told him, and then I remember him saying something like, what are you doing this summer? And he was like, well, I'm going to Estonia with you because I heard he was doing this study abroad program. So I'm going to stay with you. Okay, you're in. you know. So then I was into sculpture.
Mm-hmm.
So um at that point, I got into sculpture, and I was still a little young and naive about things. I don't know if naive's not the word, but yeah, just I didn't realize how much you really had to put into everything. And slowly, as a new art student, you realize, oh, I have to spend 2 more hours here a week. I
Mm-hmm.
need to spend 2 more hours a night here.
Yeah.
And so that got me um going. And then maybe this was, I guess it would have been my first semester, I guess, when they did the first time I experienced the iron pour. I remember I wasn't even there on time. I didn't even show up on time because I didn't know what it was. I hadn't cast anything yet. I barely put together a mold and not really knowing what the mold was going to be for. It was like, why I got this block of sand around this thing, and how's that going to really get? I just couldn't figure it out. And so I got up there late. It was already dark, and I come out, and ECU had this very small backyard enclosed area. It had a big brick wall going around it. There's probably only about 20 feet, 30 feet at the very most between the school building and the wall to the thing. And I remember walking in, it was night out, and they only had one overhead light, and everything was just orange and flames moving and flickering of lights and shadows. And everybody's dressed up real funny, and all these damn, what the hell are they wearing?
Yeah.
And I was like, what the shit is this? I couldn't wrap my hand on what I was seeing. And of course I ended up slipping charges all night because that's one of the things you do the first time you pour iron, excuse me.
Mm-hmm.
And so we point out, man, what is that thing? He goes, it's a furnace. I'm like, what's a furnace? He said, that's where they're melting iron. I said, do what? And I couldn't. And at this point, so finally I kind of, you know, ease into it and say, okay, I'll ride with it and see what happens. And then of course I start seeing, and I said, oh, I see them tapping, and they get the metal and run over. I said, oh, I think I can kind of see it now. So things started coming together. And at some point, one of the older students was slagging, and the poker got stuck in the slag, and he's sitting there trying to pull it out. And
Yeah.
I'm slipping charges with no face, no leathers, anything. And I just see a man in trouble. So I go up there and I start pulling on it, not knowing any better, with no
Yeah.
face, no leathers, no nothing. And I go and I pull it out. And then I kind of think intuitively, it's like, Tripp, you need to give that back and walk away because you don't have any gear on. So I gave it to the guy and I stepped back, and then the pour got done, and but it was like it was like waking up in a industrial harmonious Bosch painting or something. It's really real because the way the light was with the flames flickering and the shadows and the roar of the furnace, and it was just like it was another world. It's just like, so that was my first first
Yeah.
iron casting experience. Oh, and the whole night it's glowing. We're taking water bottles and punching holes in them because they got hot spots all over the place, and we're going around squirting water on the furnace. And I was like, I don't think this is supposed to be happening. This is not quite right, is it? They're like, well, it's not ideal, but but I don't even think that was probably my first semester in sculpture
Uh-huh.
when I witnessed that. And then, oddly enough, I had Hana more times than I did with Carl, just because they were the two sculpture professors, and they'd alternate who taught the grad students and who
Mm-hmm.
taught the undergrads and upper levels and whatever, they'd swap each semester, but I always fell on Hannah's side. But Carl, a lot of times I would do what was called double dipping, where you take 2 sculpture classes.
Yeah.
And then I would meet with outside of a normal class time. I'll just come by his office hours.
Yeah.
And so we got to know each other through that way. And I did pretty good. And then came time to go to Estonia, this country that, summer came around. It was my junior year. So I just finished my junior year. It was summer, and we went to Estonia, which I had never even heard of the country till 6 months before, when I, or whenever I signed up for class sculpture. I was like, what the hell is Estonia? And so, but I wanted to go. And so I remember getting up to ask my parents if I could go to Estonia and for art trip. And I was just like, there's no way they're going to give me money to go to Europe, another country. So I was like, hey, there's this, my sculpture professor is taking some sculptors, some students over to Estonia in Europe, and we're going to Finland, St. Petersburg and stuff. And it's like, any way I can go? And they were like, yeah, we can do that for you. And I was just like, what do you mean, yes? And so I was like, okay. So they give me the money to go. And of course, back then, this is like 1995, summer 95. And they gave me $500 to go to Europe with. I mean, they bought my ticket and gave me $500, and that's all I had for a month. So we go there, and of course, we did Finland first. Finland wasn't too different, it was pretty westernized. Then we went to St. Petersburg, Russia, and we got off in this alley where I swear they were, I was like, where the hell has car brought us? But the art there was amazing. It was just culture shock and too much stimulation. And I remember going to the Hermitage, going through all the mosaic tables. For some reason really grabbed my attention. I was like, man, that's amazing. And then the sculpture, some of the stone carvings, they were translucent. They just looked like they're about to stand up. It was just so intense and overwhelming. Rembrandts that were like 10 feet tall, just incredible stuff. And by this time, when I get into large groups of people or things that are not in my normal environment, I get hypersensitive, and my imagination really starts to work. And so by the time the last 2 rooms we went through, one was the Impressionists, and then the last room I was in was the Cubist. And so all the pictures are cubism. It's all broken down. I'm like, oh my God, reality's falling apart. My mind's falling apart. This is and so I'm like just really starting to lose it, just because it's so overwhelming. And luckily that was the last room we went through. We were going out. I looked at my buddy Kyle. I said, dude, I don't care what y'all do. I got to go back to the hostel. I gotta lay down.
Yeah.
So we were 10 days in St. Petersburg, and it was a lot of culture shock and very intense. But in the end, it was definitely a good experience. And then we get to Estonia. And one thing I noticed about St. Petersburg, there didn't seem to be any grass anywhere. It was just all concrete everywhere, I felt like. So we get to Estonia, all of a sudden I'm reminded of what grass was. I was like, oh my God, that's grass. Oh my, we sat down in the grass. Oh, it's green. So what we were doing there was Carl had set up a connection a couple of years before with the Estonian Art Academy. And we were showing them how to cast iron. Okay. I came on the 3rd year they did the trip.
Okay.
And so as far as I know, Carl is the one that introduced iron casting as art into Europe. Because I think Estonia was the first entry point, if I'm correct in my history, but I think I am. He was the
Okay.
first to make contact, and there was, I mean, the language barrier back then. Not a lot of people spoke English. I mean,
Hmm.
some of them did, but it's very difficult to explain what Coke was and what type of refractor we needed and stuff like that. It took 3 or 4 years to really get it honed in to where they were doing it. And so we're in Estonia, and we get to the sculpture yard. We start breaking iron, and of course, the whole trip I'm scouting. The first two things I wanted when I went on the trip, other than learn about art, was a pocket watch and a little foreign romance. But I was
Yeah.
just thinking, oh, you love you, all right, things like that.
Yeah.
Well, I found this girl. Like, all of a sudden, I was like, oh my god, that girl was cute as all. She, like, I don't know, man. But I was like, I'm gonna go talk to her. And so I'm
Hmm.
walking around, and I walked by the room she's in a couple of times, and she's just sitting there by herself. And I go in, and I said, "Are you okay? Are you mad?" She said, "No." I was like, "What's wrong? You sad?" She said, "Yeah." I was like, "What's going on?" She said, "Well, I really want to make a mold, but I don't know how to." So I was like, "Well, let me tell you."
Funny you should say that.
So why did you say that? But and so we made molds, um, and then it was like, oh my God, puppy love. Or I don't know. Being in Estonia in the summertime is very romantic because there's like it's white night, so the sun only goes down below the horizon for an hour. Sunrise, very twilight, and because it's so far north.
Yeah.
Um,
Okay.
and so it's very mystical and romantic. And so me and this girl are running around, we're just falling in love and everything. And that was then we got to the pour, and she had to wear Carl's old boots because she didn't have any boots.
Yeah.
And, and I went to Carl's like, we don't have any boots for what can we do? He goes, well, I got a pair. So she poured iron in these boots that were way too big. Like, she's smaller than me.
Yeah.
She was shorter, a little smaller. She was a small little girl. And so we suit her up in Carl's boots, and she's clanking around and falling all over the place. But we do it. But I remember that was the first time I tapped the furnace was in Estonia.
Yeah.
Carl was like, okay, who's tapping? And I was like, I'll do that. And then I remember tapping it for the first time and busting up, and it came up, and Carl was like, good show. And then that was kind of the I felt like I had crossed the threshold from just being,
Yeah.
you know, you know, somebody brand spanking new. And so we did the pour. I don't remember much else about the pour, to be honest with you. But
I mean, you are right. There is something about the first time
yeah,
a person taps a furnace. You're right. It's like I don't know how to describe it because I remember very vividly the first time
yeah,
that I was allowed to tap a furnace, and it was uh just because kind of like you can sometimes you when you're around so many experienced people, you kind of can't get in edgewise, and so when you finally get that, you're trusted with it. They think that you're sturdy, like
yeah,
you can handle it. It it's like a coming
yeah,
of age part of the iron
yeah,
casting
yeah,
process in
yeah,
a way.
yeah,
Yeah. So
yeah.
I don't blame you for not
Very magical.
remembering anything else. I mean, that's probably one of the most important things besides remember. I
Yeah.
I remember I'm not going to mention who it is because it doesn't matter, but I remember, you know, being at UGA, and there was anybody that knows much about Athens, Georgia, it is definitely a bar town, and there's a lot of partying
Yeah.
and all in good fun. And so there was a lot of sculpture guys would bring girls around, and someone would be like, yeah, she's cute, but let's see what she looks like in leathers. w- which was
Yeah.
which is also kind of like, it's one thing to be cute, but it's another thing to be worth your salt and be able to handle you know the heat, I guess. So just we'll see what she looks like in leathers.
Yeah.
Anyways,
Yes. Yeah.
so
Well,
what happened next?
so we had Finnish students, we had students from Estonia. I think we had one or two from Latvia and Lithuania. And Ane skipped the girl, like she totally ditched her exam to go on the bus ride. And of course, we're all, every time we stopped to use the bathroom, which was like on the side of the road, because it's Estonia, you just don't have gas stations where so I'd come back with a handful of flowers each time, and being very mushy and romantic, and we would eat our little lunch in the bus together. And I remember we had a Walkman and 2 CDs. We had Pearl Jam 10, and the other was Tom Waits' Closing Time.
Oh.
And that Closing Time, we listened to that over and over, and we're just like, and I hope that I don't fall in love with you. And so, and
You're giving
so
me goosebumps, and you're
and
gonna
it's
make
very
me
noticeable.
cry.
I remember hearing the old 55 song, like I pulled away slowly, basically knowing it's not going to work out. And somehow that song kept hitting me for some reason, about me and Ani. Like I knew something special was going on, but I also knew that for some reason it wasn't going to last forever, but it lasted a lot longer than I thought it was going to. And I get to that. So
Mm-hmm.
anyhow, so we're on the trip. We even bought a blanket because it was cold, and so all the other guys started bringing gifts to their little girlfriends they had found. I
Yeah.
was like, "Sorry guys, you can't copy that. It doesn't work that way." So, 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 so we go to this sculpture park. There's a reason I'm getting through all this, but we
Yeah,
go to
take
a
your
sculpture,
time. I'm
and
here with this story like all the way.
so we go to the sculpture park in Lithuania that it's got these old wood carvings all through the forest, and they're monumental size, and they're kind of like a Native American type, like in the sense that it was very totemic and animalistic and all that stuff.
Yeah.
And Carl said, "Yeah, I saw you two walking down that damn path hand in hand like 2 little elves, and I knew I had a lot of trouble on my hands." So, um, turns out, we were definitely smitten with each other's love. And the funny thing is she had only come to that pour because the year before she met another guy who was a friend of mine, and she was expecting to see him. But anyhow,
We call that water
I
under
won
the
in the end.
bridge.
But
Water under the bridge.
yeah. Yeah. So, but she was already planning to come to ECU as an exchange student
Oh,
before I
no
got over
way.
there.
I'm
And
loving
so,
this. Okay, go
yeah,
ahead.
at some point, I find out that she's coming to ECU, and I was like, oh, okay. How's that going to work out? And um, we had this was the end of the trip. It was the night before we went to Finland, because back then you'd fly into Helsinki and then take a ferry over to Estonia, and because it was so much cheaper than flying into Estonia.
Mm-hmm.
So I remember sitting in the coffee room in the hostel, and I was sitting there drinking, and Ken Payne comes in because Ken Payne and Carl, the ones that took all the students over there, they always tag teamed.
Mm-hmm.
So it was actually both Carl and Ken that introduced iron. So I should probably give Ken his due. But
Yeah.
I remember sitting there, said, talking to Ken about Anne. I was like, what am I going to do? I mean, I really wanted to come, but what happens if we fall out of love and it's just doesn't work out? He goes, you just put her on a plane. And I was like, what do you mean? He said, you put on a plane. He was more or less saying, don't worry about it. Just, you gotta, nobody knows if things are going to work out.
Yeah.
And so I go back to States, and trying to get back to the iron, but I will. But this is really woven into the whole being. So
Yeah,
anyhow,
it
so
is.
I go back to States, communicate through back then all we had was email, and I had to wait in line at the library to get to email. I hardly knew how to use the email. I mean, it was that early in the
Yeah.
game. Nobody had their own. And so we would text, and it'd be hard just to make sure we were all on the same thing. But anyhow, she comes the next spring, and she's flying into Raleigh, which is about 20 minutes from my parents' house. So I told she was a ceramic artist. Okay.
Uh-huh.
And she was coming to ECU to do her studies. And I
Mm-hmm.
told the ceramics faculty, I said, look, I'll pick her up because my parents live right there and I'll bring her back. Plus, I wanted to see her.
Yeah.
So I drove to the airport. It was 2 hours from ECU to my parents. And then I drove to the airport. She got off the plane and I saw her. And none of those feelings were there. I was like, oh my gosh. And then anyhow,
Yeah.
this things progress really quickly at this point. And of course, I'm still casting and doing all that stuff and growing. And about 2 months of us being together, she says, Tripp, I think I'm pregnant. So she
Wow.
had
Okay.
been in the States more than a month and a half, 2 months. And I said, okay, let's, she said, I got a test. I'm going to do it. And I said, okay. I said, you want me to go in there with you? She says, no, you just wait here. So we go. She goes in, finds out she's pregnant.
Mm-hmm.
She goes back. She says, yes, I'm pregnant. And I was like, okay, come here. And it was a moment of not reality that slaps you in the face, but like, this is a real thing. This is not something I can just, brush away and, say, oh, I was just drunk and, that's not my normal self. It wasn't like, it's like, all right, this is very real and I got to do something. I'm
Yeah.
not sure how I feel about getting married and all this stuff. And so in the long run, I decided, I said, let's just get married.
Mm-hmm.
And so we got married. She had to call home. I remember when she called home to tell her dad that she's not coming home from America because she's pregnant. Could you imagine calling your dad and having to say that? Dad, I'm in France. I'm not coming back to the States because I'm pregnant. So
Mm.
I finished school. Um, that all happened my senior semester.
Mm-hmm.
Then I worked a year as a brick mason's helper. Then I worked as a janitor for a while, and I wasn't making any art. I did some stone carving. I take that back. I
Mm-hmm.
got a grant to get some stone carving tools because I didn't have a foundry or anything, but I could carve stone.
Yeah.
So I did that, and then Anna came to me one day and said, "Tripp, I want to go back to Estonia and finish my degree." I said, "Okay." What? Oh, am I going with you? And she's like, yeah, I want you to go with me. And so I
Mm.
said, like, oh my God, you mean we're gonna move to another country? So long story short, we decided to go, and I packed my bags and I go to Estonia, and I lived there for 2 years. And I mainly did ceramics, sculpture ceramics when I was there, because when we got to the school, they were just like, oh, Tripp, we made a little corner for you. And I wasn't even enrolled in the classes. They
Yeah.
were just like, and, and so I was like, honey, I don't know what to make. I don't know how to make anything in clay. She said, you just draw something and I'll tell you how to make it. So I drew some and she showed him how to make it. And then Carl kept coming over with his students in the summertime.
Yeah.
Carl and Ken would keep coming by. So I would meet them. At this point, they started doing a lot of casting in Finland. It had switched from Estonia to Finland.
Okay.
And Vilo Janis was a connection there. Christian Benefield did a lot of work with him many years later, but they were casting. It was in it's Kohila. No, Kohila is in Estonia. Pirkala, Finland, I think is where we poured the next 2 years. So I'd meet Carl and all of his students every summer when they came
Yeah.
over.
Yeah.
And I remember we did one outrageous pour. Gosh, it must have been 10, 12 hours, but it was the white night. So it was like it never got dark. It was just like 10, like 6 hours of just twilight. Like, and I just remember being exhausted about, not even halfway through. I was like, man, this is going on forever. and I think the furnace was running slow, but so. And I remember carrying the ladle, and it seemed heavier than usual. I was like, God, why is this ladle so heavy? So anyhow, this is the first time I had so I had gotten there a few days late, and I made a pattern, and when I was making the mold, I was going to make the core, or I had made the core, and I was taking the foam off around it, and Carl said, just leave it in there to burn away. And I said, okay, so I put it back together.
Yeah.
So so we go through the whole pour, 8-10 hours of a pour. I forget how long, but it just felt forever because the light never changed.
Yeah.
And then so we're pour ends, and we're all drinking, and I'm smashed, and I go to open mold. I cut the bands and I kick it over, and it opens up, and I'm looking, and it didn't cast. And that was the first time I had a mold that just totally missed. I had a sprue, and I just sat there. And at this time, I was doing pretty well mentally, that my doctors had took me off, even in Estonia, that they had taken me off some medication.
Yeah.
But if I got real intoxicated, it would kind of come out. So I got all emotional. I went around the corner, and I just sat there. And I cried on the steps so hard. I was like, I'm such a loser. My mold didn't make, and I'm sitting there crying and everything. And then I forgot what happened. Oh, we were doing they were going to do a bronze pour in a couple of days, and Vilu. I had helped Vilu do work on his sculpture. That trip was the professors from all the college or guest artists would make these really big sculptures, castings. I mean, like huge, and then the students would help chase them and all that stuff. And I had helped Vilu on his, and so he said, "All right." So he let me come to the bronze pour, and we cast a piece of bronze so that I would have one. So I did that 1 year, and I came back the second, did 2 years that, and then we decided to go to grad school. And we had Liza was born by then, my daughter. Her first really language and everything was Estonian, so she was there from 1 to about 3.
Yeah.
And I knew some Estonian by then. Great time. We almost didn't come back, and we almost stayed. We were getting offered jobs, but we had already planned to come to States as exchange, as a go to grad school. We both want to go to grad school. For some reason, I don't know why we didn't do it in Estonia. But I had applied the year before. I applied to Carbondale, Alfred, and I forgot where else. And I didn't get in the first year. Carbondale said it'd be your best. It'd be best for you to apply again next year, which basically saying they would probably let me in the following year.
Okay.
And then no, that was the second year I applied. But anyhow, I applied to ECU too, even though I did my undergrad there. I was like, screw it, I'm just going to do it there. Just, I can still learn from Carl and Hannah. I still got a lot.
Yeah.
And so I applied to ECU and got accepted there. And then Anna got accepted there. So we both ended up going back to ECU. And Greenville, North Carolina, where East Carolina is like a black hole. I mean, it's hard to get out of that town. Just to go visit your parents. Just something about that town. And you go to Tower, go flat. It was like the Bermuda Triangle, Bermuda Triangle in North Carolina. So but anyhow, we come back and we go to, we start grad school at ECU.
Yeah.
And then there was this seminar class that was with the professors that was, he was students either loved him or hated him, and most of them hated him. He just wouldn't let you get a word in. But anyhow, it was a grad seminar course, and it was required to take unless unless your area supervisor gives you independent study. So me and James Davis, we were in grad school together. Neither one of us, we sat to that class like twice, and we're like, I can't do this. So we went to Carl. He goes, all right, I'll give you an independent study. You boys are going to build us as a furnace. So then me and James were on the task of building a furnace.
Yeah.
Okay. So that's how I got my furnace, Phoenix. And we based it off a furnace that was already there. And Phil Proctor, before I got there, had made a big foundation. He was going to make a big, like 24-inch or something.
Yeah.
And we cut the table down and decided to do. We basically went off the same design. It was a coupolette, with drop down tweers. So
Yep.
the blow comes in the wind belt and it drops down. And I never knew what the significance of that was, but it does keep a lot of stuff out of the wind belt. And we decided to make the wind belt bigger, and a lot of this we decided to make it a little taller, just a little bigger all around, and a bigger wind belt, taller. And we weren't going off too much math or anything really. We were just kind of, figuring it out. And we tried to cut corners a couple of times, and that's when we learned, you just can't cut corners all the time,
Yeah.
So I remember we were putting the lining in the first time. We're doing castable.
Okay.
And a castable refractory. And so we had got the thing built and everything worked as far as that, and it was time to line it. So we took this big, just a sheet of, I don't know if it was aluminum or what it was, but it was very flexible. Maybe just like a 20 gauge something. I don't know. Basically, like a flashing we did, and then and of course we used beer bottles to go through the tweers and all that. And then so we're pouring the refractor in there, then all of a sudden that inner core collapses. It just goes over. And James goes, "What do we do?" I said, "Don't panic." And so we got refractory all over the floor. It got about half full, and he was like, "We got to put it back up in the mixer." We had a big cement mixer, like a big industrial one. So we lifted the furnace up with the hoist. We shoveled everything back in, and he said, "Well, what we're going to do the same thing." Except we were casting in the foundry. So he was like, "Let's just fill it with sand, with foundry sand from the pit." So we rolled the ring again, duct taped it, and then just filled that with sand. And then we re-poured it, and we just kept adding water and kept mixing to make sure it wasn't going to get too dry. But
so I just want to clarify, because for myself, I guess, you filled the center of the flashing tube with sand so that way it would be able to withstand the pressure. Yeah. Got it. Okay.
Wouldn't collapse.
Yeah.
Yeah, it wouldn't collapse.
Okay.
Yeah, so we had the flashing was the inner, and we filled it with sand so it wouldn't collapse.
Yeah.
And then and that kept in place. The second attempt was successful.
Good.
And we pulled it. And then it ran really well. And then so we went through. So when we came back from Estonia, there was 2 years where I just worked in the medical hospital. And that's when my son was born. Because she was pregnant. We got pregnant about 2 weeks before we came back to the States at a ceramic symposium.
Okay.
So we had 2 kids while we were in grad school. Long story short, this is my thesis semester. I'm writing my thesis. We decided to split up. Me and my wife were getting a divorce. I was going through divorce. I was looking for a job. I was moving to a new house. I mean, I had like 6 of the main stressors in life. And so I leave grad school. I did the academic thing where I was adjunct professor at a community college and at ECU. And then I prepared a job myself in Rocky Mount. So I did that for 2 years, but that was part-time.
Yeah.
Because we had 10,000 square feet of show space, and it took a month to change out all the galleries.
I believe it. Yeah.
But that wasn't a bad job. But what happened is all the funding dried up for both that and this is when the economy crashed, I guess in 2008. And the word going around the adjunct is that they weren't going to hire any adjuncts. And
Mhm.
me and the administration at ECU there wasn't a falling out, but I kind of lost faith in them,
Mhm.
just well, but anyhow, so I didn't ask to come back, and they didn't ask me. And then I ended up welding in a scrapyard for 2 years. Now, here's a funny thing. When we were at Sloss, so me and James took the furnace to Sloss. That would have been 2000. Can't remember. That was the first time I took the Sloss. It was like 05 or 06. I don't know.
Okay.
Anyhow, I remember going. I just remember still being kind of green, and I was seeing everybody driving around forklifts, and I was like, "Oh man, that'd be cool to learn how to drive a forklift." And that year, Skip Van Houten had built some furnace that lifted up on hydraulics, and you pulled out the bottom, and then it was the most crazy, and it was hooked up to a truck. The
Uh-huh.
blower was, and you had to change gears to get it different. It was the most insane thing. And I was like, this is madness. And I was like, I would like learn how to do hydraulics. I want to be like that. So I ended up working the scrap yard. Guess what I ended up doing? I'm driving a
Forklift.
forklift, and I'm working on hydraulics. So I learned a little bit, not a lot, but enough to
Mhm.
understand the basics hydraulics and changing. And I got to drive the crane some, move those around. um, but that was when I kind of realized, no work was, I would do whatever it would take job wise as far as surviving. Because when I got on that scrapyard for the first day, I was like, how the hell did I end up here? But I sucked it up, and it was a good experience.
Mhm.
I learned a lot about myself, about um, that population of people,
Mhm.
uh, and how that half of the world works. Because I mean, some of them are working, you know, brutal, you know, manual labor, just
Mhm.
getting paid minimum wage. I was skilled because I could weld,
Yeah.
and but still, um, it's a hard life. But anyhow, and then I was trying to find a way out. And at this time, Kevin Eichner, who was he helped or did, I'm not sure if he's still doing it now, but he was helping with the Gene jar runner at Tucumcari.
Oh, yeah.
Kevin Eichner, because they went to grad school together at ECU, and I was in undergrad when Kevin was in grad school, and so he had been helping them in Tucumcari. But anyhow,
Yeah.
he had this small furnace in this small little place in Moncure, North Carolina,
Okay.
and he invited me down for a pour. And at that time, I didn't, I don't even know if I had a mold or if I made one when I got there, but it was my first pour in a long time. So I went, and we get going, and I remember it's like I put the bottom in. That was the first time I put the bottom in. I said, "Hey man, who's going to do the bottom? I'll do it." And he's all right. No, I did it in grad school, but I end up running the furnace by myself for 2 hours, like charging, checking spares, slagging, and carrying the charges. Just somehow, I mean, I was so exhausted. I was getting chills, because I was so hot,
Yeah.
and it was a hot summer day. It was like May in North Carolina, and we spent all day breaking iron. It was
Yeah.
brutal, and like we're laying on the ground in between taps.
Oh
After
my gosh.
after they pulled me off the furnace, finally, my friend Mike was like, "Tripp, you're off the furnace. I can't let you stay on there anymore." And he put somebody else on there. But we were so tired, we were laying down in between taps, and somebody was like, because it was a small crew there, and there was like 2,000 pounds. We only poured about 2,000 pounds of metal, but there was only six of us or so. It was a real small amount. But
Yeah.
we were all exhausted because we had spent all day in the heat breaking iron.
Yeah.
So we're laying down in between taps, and somebody's running the furnace, and they'd be like 14. So he's getting up. I can't do it right now. He's getting up. I'll get up.
Yeah.
So we got that done. And my friend Mike Waller was there, who had gone to school with Kevin too, and he had gotten involved with or started a nonprofit foundry in Durham, North Carolina, Liberty Arts. And he said, "Hey man, you should come check us out at Liberty Arts," and that was in Durham, and I was in Rocky Mount, which is about an hour and a half away. I said, "Yeah, I'll come check you out." And they had a nice foundry that Carla had helped design.
Mm-hmm.
Mike had been a year or two ahead of me. His last semester was my first semester,
Okay.
and they were trying to figure out a way to revitalize town in Durham. And Mike was working for a metal fabricator, and they were like, "Well, you need to build." Y'all, the city asked them, "What can we do to revitalize downtown Durham?" He's like, "You need art, so you need to hire this guy here to build a foundry and cast a big sculpture." And they looked at Mike and said, "Can you do that?" And Mike's like, yeah, I don't know." And then Francis at that time said, "Okay, got what? I'll talk to you tomorrow. Y'all come back." So they leave. He looks at Mike. He says, "Don't you ever say you can't do something. You just say yes and go figure it out." And so they came back, and so they got the funding to build the foundry. Just a nice foundry, still there. We still use it. And so they cast a life-size bull, because it
Mm-hmm.
was Durham. Durham was a big tobacco
Mm-hmm.
industry early in the early years, and that's where Liberty Arts got its name, was from Liberty Tobacco Warehouse, because after the tobacco industry dried up, the artists moved in to, and then of course the story. Then once the artists move in,
Yeah.
so anyhow, I go down there and I didn't even realize they had a foundry, and they were doing aluminum pour. And a guy next to them was looking for a studio mate, and it was only like $200 a month. And I told Mike, I said, "Hey man, Paul says he's got a space available for like $200 a month," and because they invited me to become part of Liberty Arts,
Yeah.
you know, and this was the last time they invited anybody before we required an application process.
Okay.
And Mike said, "Well, if you help me teach classes, I'll give you a space, you know." And so I was still in Rocky Mount. I commuted for a year, coming on the weekends. Then I get a call from Jim Glucci, who is a public sculptor in Greensboro. And I had talked to him back. I knew him through the sculpture world because he did outdoor sculpture, and I met him at shows and stuff.
Yeah.
But he's like, "You want a job?" And I was working at a scrapyard. And I was like, "I'll be there in 2 weeks." He said, "Well, you come down and let's do a welding test." So we come down, we do that. And he said, "Okay, we'll start you off at, so and such an hour." And so then I got a little bit closer to Durham. I was in Greensboro, which is about 40 minutes. And
Yeah.
so I worked with him. And then I decided I was working for Jim when he gets a call one day, because Jim's one in North Carolina. It's one of those people that just knows everybody in the art world, has connections, knows everything about everything. You know, we have him as our what do you call it, our MC at Iron Pours. He's on the microphone explaining all that's going on, because like you
Nice.
see heat coming off the furnace. He goes, "That there is an example of convection heat," things like
Yeah.
that. uh, so, but anyhow, we're sitting at lunch, and it was a valuable experience, working for him, because just to see how a professional shop works, a
Yeah.
fabrication shop, to understand that, your client's supposed to pay you Friday afternoon, and they don't, and you got to order material Monday for the next project. So things like that. And then I realized that you just can't put public art out. You have to have parts of it engineered, and you know approvals from the city and all kinds of stuff. So I learned a lot about that. Well, we're sitting at lunch one day, and everybody calls Jim for resources and stuff, and it's Western North Carolina University, and they're like, "We're looking for somebody. We wanted a lead male and a lead female to run an iron pour up here at Western North Carolina University, because we just want to get into it." And they also have a green energy park up there in Hillsboro, which is they were running glass furnaces and a kiln and stuff off methane from the landfill.
Wow. Okay.
They even ran they even got Christian Benefield got bronze furnace running off of methane. So anyhow, they're like, "Do you know anybody?" He looks at me, and I could hear the conversation going on. He
Yeah.
goes, "You got a furnace, don't you?" Because now I left this out when me and James left grad school. This was 8 years before then. We didn't. Neither one of us took the furnace because we didn't have nowhere to take it.
Yeah.
And we're like, well, whoever gets to it first gets to keep it. Okay. 8 years goes by. He's down in Southern Miss with that big ass
Mm-hmm.
4-story furnace. So he's down there, and Jim's like, don't you got a furnace? And I was like, yeah. He goes, I got a guy, I'll send him down.
Nice.
And I was like, oh my God, what have you done? So I head off to do my first pour on my own, running a pour.
Yeah.
Down in West North Carolina. And so I get Melissa Van Zant. She was floating around the world for a while. She did her MFA at Kentucky. She did her undergrad with Jim Wade. And she did her undergrad at ECU. She was an undergrad when I was in grad school. But anyhow, I knew she was in the area. I knew she'd be game. So we did it. Dude, we were so on point. Like we had everything done. We show up and the kids are breaking iron with no face shields or anything. They show up to pour. Like we told them they needed, denim, closed toe shoes. Girls are showing up in, flip flops and index, and they got mad at me because I wouldn't let them pour. I was like, but anyhow, so we had Melissa went through all the charges and mixed them up because some batches were real tiny, some were so we had everything done the day before, and we couldn't start the next day till 1. So we sat around the whole day just kind of twirling our fingers.
Yeah.
And so this is my very first pour that I've run on my own.
Yeah.
So, I was like, okay, I remember this step and I remember that step. So I need to do this. Of course, I'm not telling anybody. I'm guessing half the things that I'm trying to figure out what to do. Because you don't really know until you do it. And I'm like going through the steps. I said, all right, I think I'm ready. So we got it lit. We burned it in. I did a charcoal method of burn in, and we were ready to go on blast. So we put the blower on there, and I hit the blower. Nothing.
No.
The switch had damaged in the transit. And I didn't think to test the blower before we got. So I'm sitting
because you probably tested it at home, right?
No, I didn't even do that. It was a friend's blower that I borrowed. I didn't even think to do that. So and then the guy that was there at the Green Engine Park, he says, you know what? I think I got that same blower back here. Hold on. So he went back and he had one and he rewired it. So we wired it up real quick. And, it was a coupolette. So I could just close the lid, open the tweezers and let it draft. So it's not going to lose that much. So we only lost about 15 minutes.
Nice.
And we wired it up, turn it on.
Nice.
And we get going. And she's running hot. And, at this time, I didn't know how to set the damper because I never paid attention to it.
Yeah, so, I have no idea.
Well, I just left it wide open. I was like, well, I'm still leaving it open.
Yeah.
And it was going, man, we had hot metal. We're getting 100 pounds, 110 pounds of metal every 4 minutes.
Holy, yeah.
We're like pouring, and they're like, poor team. And somebody's like, why don't we put the damper down? I was like, it may cool it off. I don't know.
Yeah. Don't touch anything.
Don't touch anything. Running,
Yeah.
And so we get through the pour. Luckily, it was a small pour.
Yeah.
But we got it done, and that was my first pour, so I was pretty happy and proud, and it was a lot of fun. That was my first pour, and then when I was still at Liberty too, and that's what I told them I wanted to bring as my contribution, because Liberty works kind of like a small university. It's a nonprofit, but cheap's really rent, but you're expected to teach classes or serve on a committee, whether it's marketing or education or whatever. So there's things to do. And I told them that I want to do an iron pour. And so we did the first one there, and we started doing those once a year in November at Liberty in Durham, and
Mm-hmm.
we just did our seventh one. We had 2,300 people come watch last year. People in Durham. I mean, it's such a novelty in Durham. We're in the tobacco industry. But we're big tech and medicine in
Yeah.
Durham. But they love it. But I had been doing so. Then Jim Galucci asked me to do one at his pour for Tri-State, and slowly I got asked, and I was doing about 5 a year, traveling around doing different ones.
Mm-hmm.
And then I would help Mac Metz down in Star. He was an ECU alumni. Star Works is a cool place. You should check that out. It's mainly heavy on glass and clay. Phenomenal glass shop. They mine local clay because it's right down the road from Seagrove.
Okay. Where's it at?
Star, North Carolina.
Okay. Got it. Okay.
Seagroves is the big pottery capital of the country. There's
Mm-hmm.
so much clay there.
Mm-hmm.
It's pretty famous. So I'd help him out. And so slowly it grew. Just some years go by.
Yeah.
I leave Jim's because Jim wants Liberty asked me to do more classes. I said, I can't,
Mm-hmm.
have a day job. They said, well, if you do more classes, we'll give whatever commissions come through Liberty Arts, you get first dibs. So,
Yeah.
and I never had a really good plan. Like I didn't really decide if I was going to make all my income teaching or my own work or commission. So I got through about a year, and then I was like, I gotta get a job. So I got a welding job at a design company, welding the same thing. Well, first we did custom furniture, and I did a lot of cool table bases, but then I ended up we get this just welding the same thing every day, which was
Yeah.
fine. Then I get a job, Josh's Hope, So when I get back, when I was in grad school, I had friends of my parents. They had a foundation, the Hope James Foundation, and
Mm-hmm.
they came up to see. The wife Maya was. My dad was in Rotary Club. He's real big in Rotary and all that kinds of stuff. And
Yeah.
they came up to see me on a show, and they bought two of my pieces, and they just started following me.
Mm-hmm.
When I got back from Europe, we reconnected somehow, and they're real big on the hero's journey, Joseph Campbell. And so we connect on that. I did one of their programs, but we started talking about how we could find ways to use art and mental health. Because at this time, when I was back in college and had my psychosis, I would just stand in the corner and kick the wall for 2 hours. I mean, that's how
Mm-hmm.
bad it was. And I'd managed to come a good way, and I felt like I had a story I could tell. And so we started reaching out. So long story short, we're at this documentary screening of this painter that's got schizophrenia or something. And I see this flyer for Josh's Hope. And it's a nonprofit that now we train and teach employ young adults with mental illness
Mm-hmm.
and different art skills. Okay. So I'm at Liberty. First I saw that brochure at that opening. I said, I should get up with him at some point.
Mm-hmm.
Year went by, and I'm teaching welding class at Liberty, and this guy comes in with his son, and they're going to take the class. And I'm like, what do you guys do? And they're like, oh, this is what I do. And he gives me this bracelet, and it's Josh's Hope bracelet. I said, I know about you guys, and I've been wanting to hook up with y'all. So I started teaching classes for them. COVID hits, and then COVID starts to ease up, and I get a call from Steve saying, hey, we want to get some classes going back again. Why don't you come out and fish, and we'll talk about it. So I come out there, and we're getting ready to fish, and he's like talking about, I was like, how's the guys doing through COVID and all this? And he's like, they're doing good. And then he said, well, I lost my program director. Um, you know, and I said, oh, and he goes, yeah, we're looking for a new program director. I said, is it a paid position? And he was like, yeah. I was like, how much does it pay? And it was a lot. It was about twice as much as what I was getting paid at the job I was, even though it wasn't, skyrocketing great, but it was a lot better. I said, I'd be interested. And so I got a job there. So we got a wood shop. I set up a little metal shop. Um, I'm going to set up some casting at some point.
Yeah.
But anyhow, so that's more or less the trajectory of how things have gone. I went to Estonia last January to visit my kids since they have dual citizenship.
Yeah.
They have they get free college.
Yeah. Nice.
So
Hmm.
their mom lives in Seagrove because she's a potter near Star Wars. So my daughter's already finished undergrad. She got a degree in animation,
Oh, cool.
and my son's in film school right now. Now he does have a little bit of a tuition because Laza went to the art academy, ECA, and
Uh-huh.
that's free for if you have citizenship. My son's at an international school, but he still has dual citizenship. It's only like 2,000 a semester
Yeah, that's not bad.
for a 3-year degree film school, and he's rocking it. He's on he's already gotten somebody's doing a feature film and it's hired him to do some stuff.
Awesome.
He's like on every he's on every film crew he can get on, and a lot of people keep asking him to get on his crew. My daughter's got real success with the animation and stuff. She works for the academy now, and she organizes all the taking the students to film festivals and stuff.
Yeah.
And she taught. So over there, you only need a bachelor's degree to teach college.
Okay. Awesome.
Teach some courses. So she was teaching animation class at there, and I hooked up with Niels Stint, who is the one of the metal professors there,
Hmm.
and they have gotten into iron. But after we quit going with Carl,
Yeah.
it kind of died out in Estonia. Like Carl ended up going down to Latvia and meeting OERs and starting stuff there. I think they had the international conference in
They
Latvia.
did. Yeah.
So that was Carl and Ken Payne. And so, but it kind of disappeared from Estonia, and I guess somehow they got interested in it and caught word of it or something that there was iron had been done.
Okay.
So Sarah Allen had helped them,
Yeah.
and I just met her at Sloss for this first time.
Uh-huh.
She had evidently gone up there and helped them with a couple of pours. So I met him, and so I reestablished that connection. I want to kind of help restart
Yeah.
that. My kids are living there and they're not coming back. They're there. So it's easy for me to go over there.
Yeah.
And I got some pipe dreams
Yeah.
for things to happen there,
Yeah.
So I teach metal casting classes at Liberty, and I've got a program for veterans and underserved youth. It's called Iron Heroes. And pair them together. And the whole thing is based on Joseph Campbell's The Hero's Journey. And the way it works is you remember the Exquisite Corpse game where you fold
No.
paper. You've done it.
Oh,
When you
yeah.
fold paper 3 ways and somebody draws the head.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
So we did that, but with just the face.
Yeah.
And each section we did the crown, the eyes and nose, and the mouth.
Uh-huh.
Each section had a prompt. It'd be like the head was like a song that inspired you.
Okay.
You also had to have a story that it related to in real life. So let's say on Sunday mornings you used to eat apple pie with grandmother and listen to Marvin Gaye. So then you draw apple or Marvin Gaye or something.
Yeah.
Pass it, and we do it all the way around. And then after we pass it around, the whole time we're talking about Joseph Campbell's journey and the stages of the hero's journey. And after it's passed around, we tell what each part means. So we go around the circle, and we went an hour talking about all the symbolism and all the faces. And then whichever one you ended up with, you used to make your hero face. And the whole idea is that we all help build each other's heroes' qualities, and that we're also interconnected, that we make each other who we are, and that living daily life is heroic, and stuff like that. And so whatever drawing you ended up with was the one that you would mold in plasticine, and then we cast them in iron.
Awesome.
So and last November when we did it the first time, and it was the best thing I've had happen in 5-6 years. I mean, the group dynamic was so good. The veteran, it's so funny. It's funny is like comics is what Marvel and all that stuff is what made the connection, because our generation is now grown up and is making all the movies that we read about.
Right.
Younger generations are watching these movies. So, there was a very good group dynamic. And so, but yeah, so that's been great, trying to keep that going. That's, about where we are these days, doing the Josh's Hope, doing the Liberty, still doing the Pours, do that and trying to make art. And I'm going to, so I do my work's, it's all so I never delved too deep into mental illness stuff, but the art and the iron casting helped me to resolve the narrative in a lot of those themes. Because when you're in psychosis, it's just not random thoughts. There's a storyline, there's a narrative, and there's a whole world building. And the art allowed me to resolve the narratives that were going on. And iron casting gave me a community to come back to and be a part of.
Yeah.
And to weave that narrative of iron casting, that whole alchemy of turning iron to gold, taking a traumatic experience. And, the whole thing now is I did a presentation at Sloss in 2018. I didn't even talk about that.
You can talk about it now. Talk about it now.
So the first time I took the furnace on my own, I had seen Kevin at a pour with Carl, and I briefly mentioned something to Kevin about maybe taking the furnace to Sloss that year. And it turned out Kevin was on the steering committee that year. And so I get a call one evening and said, "Hey man, you gonna bring your furnace?" So
Yeah.
I don't know. He's like, "Well, we would like you to bring it." I said, "I could probably do it, but I can't afford it. So I'm going to have to ask the Hope James Foundation if they would fund it. But if I do that, then I've got to do some type of presentation on mental health and art and healing." He said, "Okay, we'll write something up real quick. I'm on the call with all the committee right now." I said, "Okay."
Yeah.
About 15 minutes later, I forwarded something. They said they love it. So I did a presentation on schizoaffective. I called it schizoaffective order, not disorder, because the story had kind of resolved itself.
Okay.
Had kind of through the art and the all that stuff. So that whole alchemy had turned iron to gold and taking a traumatic situation. And in the presentation, I said, I'm either going to do a documentary, or what was the other thing I said I was going to do next? Write a book. I ended up doing a small 15-minute. Somebody did. So the fallout from that presentation, the Hope James Foundation flew out that day to Sloss just for the presentation, and they recorded it, and then they sent it to Ajit, who is a filmmaker, to edit the sound of the recording. He was like, "Well, I like it enough that I'll do a short 8-minute film on them." And then it turned into 16. And it was really well done. And I talked about wanting to go to get an art therapy degree, and that's what kind of led to becoming a certified peer support specialist.
Yeah.
Because I didn't want to be in any more debt and go back to school.
Yeah.
People were saying, just work with an art therapist and do your thing. So, but I said something in the presentation. I said, what happens? Let's say 10 years down the road, I've come up with this really influential and helpful technique for art therapy. Like maybe this Iron Heroes thing I ironed out to be something really special. I said, then psychosis is the very catalyst that, and if that process helps somebody, it elevates society. Like every pour that I run, I tell people, I said, like, we're elevating society right now. We're getting people to forget about their daily troubles. Their time is suspended, and we're really lifting each other up and raising society to another level. I tell that to everybody. So, what if this Iron Heroes thing works out and it does really really helpful, and it's really productive? Then, psychosis was the catalyst that in the end raises society to another level. And that's where a whole lot of new psychology is going to, is that psychosis, that if it's let run naturally in a very caring and safe place, that it'll naturally resolve itself. So, and the iron has become the tactile way that I can stay rooted to the world and express that and just be there and feel it, because it's real and strong. And and there is the community, the mystery. There's a lot of mystery behind it, iron casting, how the dance just happens. And then history and mystery. It's like, if you go all the way back to the first figuring out how to make fire, and then somehow they dug up iron ore at some point and made metal, and somehow,
Yeah.
all this stuff that led up to what we do now, in this world that's full of nebulas and wormholes, and all this stuff, is like, how unique is this world that we live in? And we've got this thing that's iron, and iron comes from the stars that erupts, and it's just like. And I said something in the presentation about iron being the elixir of life, because it's the foundation. But I don't know, it's just, there's a mystery to it, and a history of mystery, of just it's got almost the whole human race in it. I mean, it's just, and I think that's one of the things that attracts us, because we're a continuation of that, and we embody that history. And it's the same thing like you're doing. Recording all these people is doing the same thing. It's carrying that tradition and the history, just in a new way.
I love all of that so much. It like is giving me chills. Just, everybody comes to iron with their own experiences and with their own history, but there is this something about, and different things connect different people, and we relate in different ways, but that nowness, and that what you were talking about, where it makes the people participating forget about all of the noise. And you didn't
Yeah.
use that word, I'm using that word, but that's how I think of it, as like all of the daily responsibilities that like kind of
Yeah.
drag you down. And I kind of, in I'll call out Cassie Redman's
Yeah. I
interview,
listened to her interview. Yeah.
and that one, we got pretty I got pretty dark and pretty
Mm.
personal about talking about kind of like my depression and how I'm coping, and yeah, but it's just like anything to remind you that life is so beautiful.
Yeah.
And sometimes those dark moments, when you actually see the light, the contrast, if you can be in the right headspace, you
Yeah.
can realize like how, I've started going on walks in the morning before work, and it's like I can really appreciate how beautiful that like clover flower or dandelion is, like these weeds, but just like I don't know, that's such a weird specific. I'm like
No.
rambling, but yeah, it's like seeing the dark times and
But
then being re-exposed to the light and remembering and connection, and like being in the dance and being at Sloss and remembering the history. Yeah, I don't know. It's just something that it's like, oh yeah, life is worth living, and this is why I'm here. Mm.
yeah, I
And I
think
have
it.
something to contribute. It, like,
Yeah.
it touches on all of those things that make life, remind us that life really is beautiful.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think it gives us a meaningful life, to where that sustains us against those dark times.
Yeah.
And even Joseph Campbell talks about the jewels in the abyss, the treasures.
Yeah.
That you can, you know, if you would have asked me, like, my psychosis was one of the best things that could ever happen to me, even though it was terrifying as hell. I mean, it's basically like Revelations, like seals being broken. I mean, it's very terrifying.
Yeah.
Now, I don't know if I'd ever I wouldn't wish it upon anybody. I don't know if I'd want to go through it again, but if that hadn't happened, I wouldn't have had to impulse to do so many things with art and healing, and it's
Mhm.
given me a lifetime of, I mean, I've been trying to heal from it the whole time, but it's given me a lifetime worth of work and ways to connect with people, and that vulnerable, being able to be vulnerable enough to um talk about it and to show people that, yeah, the abyss sucks, but it's not the end of the world. And there's something there you can glean that, like you said, when you get into the light, then you can see, the not the importance, but the kind of see why things had to happen. Like I was on a very self-destructive path. I mean,
The ability to take bad things that happen and reframe it to make it be something that changed your life for the positive is a gift, but it's like a learned gift. You have to work at it. I feel like we're not just born knowing how to do that.
yeah,
And so in Cassie's interview, that's when I kind of talked about my dad passing away just recently in the past 2 years. And that was kind of the first time that I've mentioned it because I didn't have the confidence to before. But I just remember, that's the worst thing that ever happened to me at this point in my life. It may not be the worst thing that ever happens to me,
yeah,
but I remember at a certain point when, so he, I, now I'm kind of like taking your interview and turning it a little bit
sorry,
about
it's
me, but like in an attempt to kind of relate in that you're talking about how hard going through your psychosis and your treatment was, and then being able to use that to enrich your life and fuel good things. We knew that he was dying of brain cancer for
yeah,
almost 2 years.
yeah,
And watching that happen is like, like I said, the worst thing that ever, knowing that there was just a limited amount of time left. And at a certain point, I realized I was so miserable and so depressed that, like, that's not what he wanted for me as a father. Like, you do everything for your kids. That's the last thing that all he ever wanted was for us to be happy,
yeah,
his kids. And so I owed it to him. And so I was able to reframe it to say, like, okay, how am I going to make a difference? How am I going to make this be the best thing
yeah,
that ever happened to me? And it's, and I think that that's something that is universal. Like,
yeah,
your story and my story and anybody's listening story, whatever the worst thing is that has happened to them is going to be wildly different.
yeah,
But if they can have the strength and um, the fortitude to know that if they think about it in the right way and get the help that they need, whatever that form is, it can really make life better.
yeah, and that's the whole hero's journey, and I recommend. Joseph Campbell wrote a book, Hero with a Thousand Faces, and it
Okay.
basically uh, charts out the stages that the hero goes through. That any story arc is part of that, is either a segment of those stages or the whole thing in itself. But you can kind of, it's metaphorically like things like call to adventure, and then the magical aid, and then crossing the threshold into the unknown, and then the test and trials and the abyss, and then the reemergence, gaining the elixir, and then the return threshold, and then coming back to society. So it's a way to map out, not only to see where you are, but know that there's a path forward, and that people have traversed this path for millennia, since we've been telling stories. And stories is the way it's been passed down.
Yeah.
It's going to be the same. Our podcast, these podcasts are going to be that. So um, I think it is universal, and I think that's one of the gifts that binds us as humans, and how we can feel compassion and stuff, because before my psychosis, I was a very egotistical, loud person. And my mom says I'm a much more better person because of it. But
Yeah.
I mean, oddly enough, it's the pain and suffering that unites us just as much as
Yeah.
when we allow ourselves to be vulnerable. Then I can say, I may not understand completely how it is to lose your father because my parents are still here, but I know what it's like to hurt really bad. Like
Yeah.
when I was sick, I thought heaven couldn't be on earth because I was the one blemish on the earth that caused. It was horrible stuff, but I don't want that on anybody. So now I'm just like I try to give people as much benefit of the doubt and room just to be who they are.
Yeah.
Because that's all we can do for each other and share our stories and hold each other up when we can, and let them pull us up when we fall.
Yeah.
That's the
And that
whole.
and that is what we all, like you said, that's all we can do for each other, but it's also like that's all we need from each other too, is to have a community hold us
Yeah,
up when we feel like we can't hold ourselves. And a community that gives us space when we need time to figure
yeah,
out the things that need to be figured out, because, you know,
yeah,
and there is something about the shared, like, I think that the labor of an iron pour, the physical work
yeah,
plays into the play. I don't know if I want to say it's trauma, but there's something about working physically hard with another group of people that bonds you in a way
yeah,
that is really steadfast.
yeah.
Like, there's something about it.
It's a common goal that we're reaching towards, I guess.
Mhm.
And you know, I wrote a poem something about the reason why we keep facing the Leviathan and the storm is because we can't live without the adventure and the we don't want it to be too easy or it's not gonna, I think we as humans just we want that adventure. We want that.
Yeah.
We so it's like
Yeah.
I
I
was
have
listening.
something I want to tell you about related to facing the Leviathan in the
uh,
after show. I'm going to write it
all
down.
right, all right.
But with that note, do we want to
Yep.
talk about what you've got hot on the horizon?
Yeah, I've got the superheroes convention I'm going to, Heroes Con in January. I mean June,
Mm-hmm.
uh
Yeah.
just a couple of weeks away. And I've got myself a booth for my sculptures because they're kind of fantasy totemic sculpture-ish, and they're
Yeah.
anywhere from 7 to 8 tall, so they'd be pretty impressive. So I'm taking that and try to finish. I got a book of poems that go with a lot of these things.
Uh-huh.
They all interconnect and tell a story. My story basically in a symbolic version, the narrative, but it's not linear
Mhm.
and it suggests a story. So you kind of finish it off with your own imagination. So I may
Yeah.
have a few of those printed to go with the sculptures. And then they also had a space for nonprofits. So I got the Iron Heroes signed up. So they're gonna take all their masks and a
Mhm.
few that are gonna be there. I'm gonna get some pictures. One of the moms who ended up being part of the process documented the whole process just amazingly. I mean, just from start to beginning. So we're going to have those there and QR code. I'm hoping people will just, QR $1. We're trying to fundraise to keep the program going.
Yeah.
Um,
Awesome.
that's the main thing. And then things quiet down quite a bit for the summer. Um, I've taken off so much time between going to Sloss and Europe in January that I've used up a lot of my time from work. So this
Yeah.
summer will be quiet. And then September we do our pour in Winston again. Um, and then fall we do a big pour in Durham in November. Last year we had 3 furnaces running, but we had to scale back. Just got to be too much.
Yeah. Yeah.
We were doing 350, 400 scratch blocks.
Jeez. Yeah.
It's just got to be a lot. I asked the board to find another way to raise money. And so
Yeah.
we're going back to one furnace, but we're going to also bring in ceramics for raku, and we got some glass blowers that may bring a portable glass. It's going to be more of Liberty Arts Fest than the iron pour.
Okay.
Because when Liberty Arts got started, it was originally just casters, metal workers, but
Yeah.
it's changed so much years. There's just two of us now, me and Mike, that cast, and so that's pretty much it. And then North Carolina, there's a lot of metal being poured. Like Kevin does a pour or two a year at UNCG. I do one for Jim in Greensboro. Mac Metz is down in Star. He does one. Then you got Joe Bigley at
Yeah.
Western North Carolina. He's pouring all the damn time. We're like, Joe, slow down. We can't even get molds made.
Yeah.
And so yeah, we do maybe we counted it up. It was like 18 and 20 pours last year between
Yeah.
all of there's a lot of us here in North
Yeah.
Carolina. So that's it. Just running around doing that. I'm hoping to get my certification in peer support specialist,
Mhm.
and keep going at Josh's Hope. And I want to get iron there. I meant to catch up with Kevin Shun about his continuous tap,
Mhm.
because I would like to be able to offer casting to this population, which is 18 to 35. Um, but I need to be able to have it done in a way that's on a pretty small scale, just because the skill level reaction time sometimes is not quite
Yeah.
there.
Yeah.
And so I'm just trying to figure out how to work around that. And
Mhm.
it may just be where I do a really small furnace and just have a one-on-one, you know, instruction and
Yeah.
team, that may be how it has to do. So that's what's on the horizon. So, and I'm trying to one day I have some type of movie made, because the kids are in film school and
Oh
just
yeah. I was thinking that actually that you'll be
Andre
set
said
up.
Andre said he would film the conference if it comes to Estonia. He said he'd film the whole thing. So we'll see. We got many years to go.
Yeah.
So
That's very exciting. I mean, if it all works out, maybe I can film alongside him
yes,
and he
definitely.
can give me some
Yeah,
pointers and
yeah, yeah,
cuz I didn't go to film school and that's
yeah,
just fine, but I do feel like getting quality footage
yeah,
and recording, you know, you can only be so many places with just one camera.
yeah, yeah. No, he would love to do that.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah. But just put it out in the universe
Yeah,
and,
the universe.
you know,
Maybe not this round, but maybe the next round.
yeah. Who
So
knows? The sky's the limit.
yep, yep.
And the universe always looks out for us in a weird way.
You know, I've noticed that if you sincerely put the best foot forward you can each day, things that you need and you wish for tend to come to you sooner or later.
Yeah.
But maybe not in the form you expected. Most of the
Right.
time it's a little weird or a little unsure, but
Or
success,
surprising.
yeah, success and opportunity always comes in strange,
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
like seeing a person dressed up in leathers for the first time. What the hell
Yeah.
is that?
You had no idea. You'd never
Yeah,
know. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. I
yeah.
remember I don't think I've ever told this story before, but the first time that somebody told me about iron casting and that they make molds out of sand. Now I had experience doing small scale jewelry centrifugal casting with investment in
Yeah.
like the little tiny flasks. And I
Mhm.
just remember this guy talking about this place where they poured iron and they made molds out of sand and the sand, and I just didn't believe him.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
100% was not impressed and didn't believe him.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then like a week later,
Yeah.
it turns out that we're both in this like large scale casting class together. And,
Making sense.
he was experienced because he had worked at Sloss,
Yeah.
but then I was like, oh, well, I guess you were right. And now he's one of my best friends.
Yeah.
So it's funny
Yeah.
how I
You know,
just didn't.
my daughter did a very short documentary on iron casting. You can find it on YouTube.
Mm-hmm.
It's under, if you look up Firefest Star Works, is it 2019? But
But that
there,
might even just Firefest Star Works might
yeah,
just pull it up.
it's a 6 minute video, but it's actually a very good introduction video to show that it just talks about what it is, what the key roles are, like what's a tapper, what's a
Yeah.
botter. You know, they asked her to we had to do everything virtual. So they said, can you film it and just put something together? And so she was just taking raw footage, not knowing how she was going to put it together.
Right.
And she only had like a week or two turnaround time, and she threw it together. It's fun and it's good, and so
I'm gonna check it out because I'm
check
always
it out.
looking to see what else is out there and to see how I can learn from people that are better at editing than I am.
Yeah. Well, yeah.
Well, so in closing of the public episode, do you have any advice for us?
Oh yeah.
You're like, oh, right, I forgot.
I no, the biggest thing, I would say is try not. I heard somebody say one time, I said, don't compare yourself to others, but who you were a year ago.
Mm,
We all bring different things to the table. We all have a story that's what our talisman superpower is our story. And we each have something unique to bring to the table. And I read, it was a quote by C.S. Lewis. I was a big Narnia fan when I was a kid,
me too.
Star
Yeah.
Wars and all that. And I was reading through one of his writings, and it says, not to get real religious or anything, but it says if we all were to sing the same note, then there would be no victory of whatever. It was basically saying that, if we all had the same thing, there would be no variation in beauty and music. And
Yeah.
so we all have, the thing is just to touch in, like, I'm not the most knowledgeable iron caster. There's people know a lot more than me, but I think my favorite part of iron casting is teaching new people. And I think I have this ability to, shine light in a different way. I don't know. We all have our different things, and you know, try not to be afraid of not knowing things,
Mm-hmm.
because I missed out on a lot of good information by acting like I knew what was going on.
Yeah.
So, but, just remember so like I was talking to somebody one time, and they said, Tripp, the universe is so big, we don't really matter, and it just didn't sit right for me. And I got thinking, you got space nebulas, you've got galaxies upon galaxies, this infinite space. This huge universe took the time to make you, took the
Mm,
time to make me. And not only that, but to make you the center of your universe and me the center of mine, and that we can cross pollinate on that. So it's like you're special because you're here, and you have that treasure is in the abyss of your personality that you just got to uncover, and that's your hero side that we got to all bring out. So that's my advice.
yes. Yes. Yeah. Thank you for that. Wonderful. Like that was really advice that hit me right where I needed to hear it today. So let's go on over to the after show. I did say I wanted to talk about how the Leviathan, how we
Yeah.
face the Leviathan. So I want to kind of talk about that in the after show just shortly. But do you have anything that you want to tease, like a specific story? I have some like prompts here, but we don't have to follow any of them.
Um, I don't know. We can start with the Leviathan and see where it goes, but
Okay.
and tell you about the time we poured iron in a hurricane.
Yes. I've heard a lot of iron in tornadoes, but I've never heard of an iron pour in a hurricane. So let's do that. I'm
Let-
writing that down.
Let's start off with the Leviathan, see where that leads.
Okay. Okay.
Then
Because I think you might enjoy it.
yeah,
What I'm about to tell you.
I'm
So,
sure.
anyways, so for the public audience, though, I'm gonna say goodbye to them. So, thank you so much for being on the show and letting me, ask you all these questions and really, I feel like you really did bare your soul a
Yeah.
lot. So, thank you for your bravery.
Thank you. Thank you for making it happen, giving us the platform to say
Yeah,
these things.
and I really hope that, especially stories like yours, somebody out there will really get inspiration and maybe get a second wind and maybe just either feel validated in their own story, knowing that they're not alone, or maybe it'll help them reach out and get some help that maybe they're being quiet about that they need. So, yeah. All right. So
All right.
everybody who's listening and watching, thanks so much for tuning in. And you should come over to the after show and listen to our secret stuff. But if you can't, I understand. And thanks so much for tuning in anyways. And we'll see you in the next one. Thank you so much for tuning in today. This conversation doesn't have to end here. To gain access to the after show where Tripp and I continue our discussion, visit the website patreon.com/thepodcastiron. And for as little as $1 a month, supporters on Patreon get access to the after show recordings from every episode that's ever been published. So if you're new here, the after show is just an extra 15 to 20 minutes, sometimes more, with each show's guest where we continue chatting a little bit and we get to talk more candidly and share at least one or two more stories behind the privacy of a paywall. So yes, if you sign up now, you'll get access to listen to the after show from this episode and from all of the other 40 episodes with all of my other earlier guests. And every $1 really does make a difference to subsidize the costs that I undertake to make this resource publicly available, and you get the private after shows, so it's a win for everyone. Well, in conclusion of this public portion of the episode, I hope you enjoyed listening to this interview as much as I enjoyed talking with Tripp. His heart is in such a good place in both his day job and his iron casting and studio practice. He makes such a difference in so many people's lives, and it was inspiring to hear about all of it. Tripp, thanks again for having this conversation with me and sharing the ups and downs of your life's journey so far, and for sharing the insight into what your artwork represents. I know that this interview will inspire many more than just me to keep going when life turns tough. And after all of this, I can honestly say that Tripp, you're one of my iron heroes. And now, thank you one last time to the top supporters for helping me afford to continue offering this show. So thank you to the Metal Museum for your support of this podcast and for offering our cast iron art community such amazing exhibition and learning opportunities, as well as foundry apprenticeships. In my opinion, the Metal Museum is one of the premier places in the world to learn the art of iron casting, and to have a museum of this caliber exhibitioning works by artists in our tribe, it's such a great honor and a gift. Thank you, Crescent Creative, for being a top supporter of this podcast iron, and also for demonstrating how artists can create an interesting and inspiring life for themselves by producing custom client work. You're a great role model to many of us. Thank you to the Western Cast Iron Art Alliance for being a top supporter of today's show. I'm so honored and encouraged to have your support, and thank you for all of the work that you do in the service of the Western region of the U.S. and its cast iron artists. And thank you, Sloss Metal Arts, for being a top supporter of this episode, and also for your year-round work as a National Center for Iron Casting and Metal Art, and for offering our community visiting artist and resident artist opportunities that actually offer realistic living benefits. So yes, in closing, thank you to all of our top supporters for today's episode, and then also our individual supporters on Patreon. The funds that everybody contribute are really really help me continue to put on this show and help me keep going. But if you don't have it in your budget to support the podcast Iron on Patreon, I understand. Instead, just if you could share this with somebody that you think would be interested in listening or watching, and I'll appreciate that just as much. Anything and everything helps. And for that, I say thank you from the bottom of my heart. If you want to get in touch with me, you can email me at thepodcastiron@gmail.com. Now remember, apply for the Shape of Community rotating sculpture series. The deadline is the end of February, so February 29th. Also, apply to be a resident artist at SLOST for 3 years. The deadline for that is March 1st, and they're taking 2 people onto that position. Also, apply to be a steering committee member for the national conference at SLOST, and the deadline for that is March 1st. And apply to be a summer visiting artist at SLOST. The deadline for that is March 15th. Register for the fire conference at the Metal Museum, and that's going to be, like I said, May 30th. And I got to warn you that the tickets for that, they sell out. So you got to buy them quick or you'll have to wait until next year. But also, the casting-based exhibition Branching Out at the Metal Museum opens February 18th. And Morgan Lugo's exhibition opens April 22nd. And look into Repair Days in that Preston Jackson, Master Metalsmith exhibition. That's going to be really something amazing. And that's all I can think of right now. I've already told you all of this stuff anyway, so I'm cutting myself off, but I just have to just remind you one last time. But thanks again for listening and watching. I'm sending you all my love always, and I can't wait to share the next episode with you. I'll talk to you soon, and have a great day.